the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, January 23rd. If we could all rise for the pledge. Roll call, please.
Chair Clark, Vice Chair Perry, Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Lesner-Buxton,
Hugh.
Commissioner Longstreet,
Here.
Commissioner Martinez-Cohen,
Here.
Commissioner McGill.
We do have a new member of the commission joining us today, Mr. Corey Baker. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Baker.
Welcome. Changes to the agenda. I believe we have one change to the agenda. We've taken an item off.
Yeah, Chair Clark, Commissioners, we are going to postpone item 9, which is the subcommittee for the De La Guerra Plaza Revitalization Project, to your February 27th meeting. At that meeting, we will also have on the agenda the opportunity for the Commission to review your liaison appointments to the various advisory committees.
Thank you. Written communications, we do have 2 letters that we received from people regarding one of the street tree items. I believe we all received those by email and read them. We also have paper copies, so those are in the record. We've come to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. The total amount of time for public comments will be 15 minutes. I don't see any slips that aren't related to items on the agenda, so we'll move on to our youth council report.
Chair Clark, Commissioners, we have Michael Diaz from the Youth Council who's going to give the report this month.
Bus passing for members to get to their meetings and other events. We are still collaborating with tobacco prevention with the county on secondhand smoke and non-smoking education in the city. Our gun safety ad hoc committee is working with the Santa Barbara Response Network and their gun safety task force We had a special subcommittee meeting with the mayor and the city's attorney's office to learn more about gun safety. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate all the work you're doing to educate our community about gun safety and teen suicide prevention. We've come to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. I think I'll start down with Jacob.
I was unable to go to the youth council meeting because I was sick.
Okay, I did attend the Park Foundation meeting last week, and we reviewed financials, which were in order. We, particularly incoming donations. We had an update on the Cabrillo Pavilion, and particularly the new restaurant award, and we had a discussion and resolution on some, I will call them process improvements to help with the workload with the department and the various umbrella groups.
Commissioner Perry.
I was able to attend the arts and crafts meeting last month, and they are dealing with the cold weather, the winter, and limited attendance of artists, but they will be fine as our days get longer. Thank you.
I'm assuming Mr. Baker doesn't have anything to report
No, I do not.
yet.
Not yet.
Commissioner.
Unfortunately, the regularly scheduled Creeks Committee meeting last week was canceled. It was supposed to be a site visit of the Hidden Valley project, but it was canceled due to the rain. It was raining quite a bit, so we decided not to go out there. So hopefully next month.
The Sea Level Rise Committee has been meeting regularly and looking at the adaptations for different levels of sea level rise. Not pinning it to years as we started out with, but to some trigger points about how much sea level rise we're experiencing. We will be taking next month off when the consultants do their work on evaluating these adaptations and coming up with some cost analysis. So there's been some interest in the paper. There's been some articles, and I really encourage everyone to start educating themselves on the future that we're looking at. So it's not the happiest of topics, I think, for us as a city, but it's one we need to face together as a community. So it's been interesting.
I too attended the Park Foundation board meeting along with Commissioner McGill. And I attended the Street Tree Advisory Committee where we discussed all the street and setback tree removal items on our agenda, as well as a street tree designation. The department has 10 new enforcement cases. They've closed 2, and they have 14 open cases right now. And with that, we're going to move on to ceremonial items, employee recognition, and service award pins.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the City Administrator recognized one of our employees this month for 5 years of service. That would be Ray Unzueta. Ray is currently, his title is Senior Maintenance Worker, which doesn't really adequately describe all the things that he does. If you see a broken bench and then it's fixed, if you see some really nice carpentry work in our parks, it's something that he's done. He fixes a lot of the safety issues that we have in our park system, works closely with a number of our Parks Division staff to advance projects. And I have to say I could talk about a lot of different ones, but those of you that have enjoyed the playground at Shoreline Park know that we have a curved bench there. Well, that was refurbished, and that's a bench that was built in probably 1968, and he took the time to figure out how to do it while preserving the integrity of that bench. Ray actually came to us and started in the forestry division. So he moved from forestry as a tree trimmer 1 into his current position, bringing with him a lot of his construction background. So with that, I want to just acknowledge his 5 years of service with the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. And now the commission would like to recognize Maury Tremaine. I don't see her in the audience. I do know that we have a beautifully written letter by Mr. Downey, and I was wondering if he was going to come up and speak to that?
Chair Clark, certainly we can do that. We also have a number of members of the Street Tree Advisory Committee here who I believe wanted to attend in order to recognize their fellow committee member. Perfect timing. Scratch that comment.
Maury, you've come just in time to be recognized. I believe Tim was ready to say a few words. But
Chair Clark and Commissioners, Maury Tremont has been on the Street Tree Advisory Committee for 12 years. She, in many roles, has done wonders to preserve trees in this community for the future of our urban forest. She worked on the task force for the Urban Forest Management Plan as a representative of the Street Tree Advisory Committee, and has diligently worked to evaluate the applications and look at it from both the property owner's perspective and the city's perspective, the community's perspective. She's always coming up with alternative solutions to the problem, and is just extremely dedicated. One of the things that she does when we have our street tree designation, she'll bring resources along so that people can look at the trees that in a book form that they're talking about maybe considering to add. She is a valuable resource that will be missed until she can sit again. So, I want to thank Maury for all of her hard work and service to the city's Parks and Recreation Department.
Nothing other than thank you very much. Appreciate this acknowledgement.
So in my short time as a liaison to the Street Tree Advisory Committee, I've been impressed every single meeting that you've come completely prepared, and you find this balance between property rights. You're a property owner, and you understand the need to feel like you have control of your property and you can do what you need to do with it, but you also balance the needs of the urban forest, and you're graceful and you're tactful, and you're an inspiration. So I wanted to say something really eloquent, and all I could do was think of the Lorax whenever I try to think of you. And I got you a little shirt that says, "I speak for the trees," because you do. And thank you for everything that you've done.
That is true.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to say a few words?
Just a big thank you. A big thank you, especially for your time on the Urban Forest Management Plan. That was a labor of love, and thank you for working on that.
Okay, and thank you to the members of STAC who came forward to show their support today for Maury. And with that, we'll move on to consent items. We have a summary of council actions. Does anyone have any questions on those? No? Okay, and yeah.
I had a question. One of the one was the UCP lease is only for 6 months. Isn't that unusual? Don't they usually go for 3 years or longer?
Chair Clark, Commissioner Longstreet, they're actually taking over additional space at the West Side Center that was recently vacated. And so in order for the lease agreement to align with the next fiscal year, we just did a 6-month, and then when we get to the new fiscal year, we'll wrap it into the next year.
And the other thing I would just like to comment on is I was reading about the lease agreements for staff at the parks, and just wanted to mention that Steve Spencer, who was a longtime resident of Schofield Park, he was our resident caretaker there as well as a parks employee, passed away in December. And so it just brought that to mind when that happened. And I was happy to see that the lease agreements went forward. So thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Now we've come to Street Tree Advisory Committee items. And before we start, I would like to say that any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission may be appealed to the City Council within 10 days pursuant to provisions of the Municipal Code. Mr. Downey?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the first item on the agenda is 550 Olive Street. It's in front of the MTD Administration Building. The tree has grown in that location to the point where it blocks a security camera that is aimed at the front of the building and actually rotates to their parking area in the back. So it's creating a visibility and safety issue for their security. The committee reviewed the tree and saw that there was opportunities along the street frontage to put a tree in another location that wouldn't interfere with the security cameras. The recommendation is to approve the removal on the condition that it is replaced with a tree that has the capability of achieving 25 feet in height somewhere along the street frontage.
Does anyone have any questions? When I did go out there and visit with the Street Tree Advisory Committee, the tree's oddly shaped and been pruned in an interesting fashion over a course of years, so it doesn't even really look like a tree. It looks more like a shrub. And I agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendations that some more tree-like trees can be planted elsewhere on the property. I don't think it would be it wouldn't materialistically affect the neighborhood to remove that. Anybody else?
I'd make a motion that we approve the removal at 550 Olive Street of the Ficus benjamina on the condition that a tree that can achieve a height of 25 feet be placed in close proximity to the street frontage.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item is 211 Oliver Road. The applicant is requesting to remove two of the Monterey cypress along the front and only two. There are several others. The concerns are for safety of the electrical lines. The trees actually lean toward a neighbor's property, and concern for their safety and fire hazard concerns. The committee reviewed the site. In fact, staff went out to the site again today after our rains to just check the trees one more time. When a tree is assessed for hazards, an arborist needs to observe defects which preclude the safety of the tree. In this example, the trees do lean. But that in and of by itself are not reasons that the tree is necessarily a hazard. You look for signs that the tree is moved, that there's decay present. None of those signs are visible on these trees. They developed with that lean, they grew in that orientation, and through some pruning they can lighten up the backside of the tree so it's not quite so heavy back there. For those reasons, the committee felt that there wasn't strong reasons to approve the removal. They recommend that the commission deny the removal of these two trees.
Questions for Mr. Downey? We do have some.
I have a question. I went out to the site yesterday, and it appeared there had been some pruning that looked fairly recent on them. Is that true? Kind of high up in the crown.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, it did appear today that Southern California Edison has done some recent work on the side of the wires. I didn't observe any other work. I was more concerned about the base of the tree when we went out there today. The other thing I wanted to add is just for the sake of the audience out there and Commissioner Baker, as well as a reminder for you, any decision today does not mean that if conditions change in the future, that they can't reapply to have this tree removed, these two trees removed in the future if the conditions change.
So the cuts were in the center of the tree. And they did look like an Edison type cut. They had no aesthetic value, if I could put it that way. It concerned me because the weight's on the outside. Is this looking where it's going to get in trouble at that point because of the work done in the center of the tree?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, these trees, when they get this large, they develop strengths to hold themselves up in that position. When we influence them too much and too drastically, that can influence their safety. But again, staff did not observe any defects that would preclude the safety of these trees, and staff would be happy to work with the applicant to talk about pruning methods that could occur to improve the situation and make the tree much less risk than it seems to be today.
If there's no further questions,
Yeah, I went out and looked at it this morning as well and took some photos and was, I guess, struck by the aesthetics of the trees, particularly with that pruning job. And I was just wondering, given the obvious issues with the lines, because they wouldn't have been pruned that way if there weren't issues with the lines, and given the condition to replace with the jacaranda, could you talk a little bit about what the issue would be with leaving 4 of the 6 and putting in a jacaranda? It seemed like a reasonable approach, and I'm curious to know why you don't think it is.
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, the Monterey cypress are larger trees than the jacaranda, and the committee felt that they just were such a value to the area. There aren't really very many large trees in the area, and it would be a loss to the community to have that period of time when there wasn't any clear signs that there was any imminent danger on the tree.
Comparing the photo that we were given today with what came in our packet, which was ones I think that you took, I really would want to refer this back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee to look at again, because this is a drastic pruning to me, and aesthetically I think it's pretty damaging to these trees. Yeah. Can we refer it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee for another visit? I'd rather do that than...
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, that's certainly an option if you would like more input from the committee.
I would like more input, and I would make a motion to that effect.
I'll second that motion.
Before we start there are people here for public comment. I think maybe we should allow them to come up and speak before we move forward and close the issue. Are you asking to talk, or are you just... Oh, okay, so... I'm agreeing with you. Okay, great. Would the Daslia, the applicants, please come speak?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, my name's David Dassler. My wife and I own the residence at 211 Oliver Road. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, and thank you and the Street Tree Advisory Committee for the work you do to preserve, our neighborhoods and our environment. I mean that sincerely. It's why we live here. We're here, my wife and I are here because we are concerned about the safety, and I'm not an arborist, but I am an engineer, and I hold a master's degree in structural engineering, and I'm a registered mechanical engineer in the state of California, and I have built things for years and years, and I just have a concern at the degree that those trees are leaning. I think what exacerbates it for me is that they lean over my neighbor's property, so it involves a third party here, and I understand the benefit and the value of the trees to the community. It's hard for me to appreciate that value when it looks like a risk to me when I look at those trees. I took the opportunity to read the ordinance, and there are a couple of things that you're probably very familiar with, but I can't help but emphasize. Under the considerations for removal, one of the items is the number and size of other trees which would remain upon the building site after the requested removal. I think that photograph shows these magnificent trees that are out there. The two that we're talking about, and you have some other photos in the packet, are this photograph is looking basically northwest. Those photographs are those trees are on the far north side of the property. They're kind of shadowed by the bigger trees, although the one to the far right of the photograph is certainly one that we are requesting permission to pull out. And it would affect that picture, certainly. But the point is that there are other trees, there are 3 other Monterey cypress and another tree on that frontage in the setback that would remain. So I think that's worth noting. And I guess the other thing is that there's a 10-foot parkway there. There's certainly an opportunity to put a city street tree in that parkway that would maintain the aesthetic. And we're totally prepared to put the replacement tree in. We said jacaranda, we could put a Monterey cypress in. I think it's slower growing. It might be a longer term proposition, but we're certainly open to the species of tree that might go in there. And then under findings for removal, I can't help but point out that one of the findings is that the character of the immediate neighborhood with respect to forestation will not be materially affected by the proposed removal. It's hard for me to appreciate that with virtually all of those trees on the left-hand side of that photograph remaining, and they're magnificent, that it would materially affect the neighborhood with respect to forestation by removing the 2 that I view as problematic. And then finally, the last potential finding that the Commission could make is that regard for the safety of persons or property dictates their removal, which is my feeling based on my experience in my career and my intuition. No one is suggesting the trees are diseased in any way and that might create the issue. It's just the structural integrity.
Okay, thank you for coming up and explaining that to us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we also have another speaker on this agenda item. It's Mr. Ferguson. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Bill Ferguson, next door neighbors of the Dasslers, representing myself and my wife, Susan. We're pleased to have been neighbors with the Dasslers for a long time, and we're in agreement with them on what's proposed with the trees. I think for us the biggest issue is that potential for those trees to come down on our house or on our cars or on our people that are might be in the area at the time. The picture that Commissioner Longstreet referred to, I think, is the one that we provided as attachment to our letter from yesterday. We thought it was important to show that angle of it. Virtually all of the mass on that tree is on the side that's aimed toward our house, and so when the wind blows from the southeast and it's been raining, we're always a little bit nervous when the peak wind comes up. So we appreciate that you're able to take account of what we're saying here, and we hope to work out some kind of solution here that would allow those 2 to come out, leaving the other ones where they may flourish better than they have in the past because they're so crowded in there, and find an appropriate replacement for those. I think that would be a good solution. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those. Otherwise, again, thank you for the opportunity and for the process.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm going to open this up for discussion. My thoughts are it seems like both parties that came and spoke today are concerned about safety, and we've gotten the city arborist telling us that safety is not an issue. If it was something about aesthetics, maybe we could understand that after that large pruning cut, but Mr. Downey has said that there's no obvious defects in the tree and the lean's not extreme. So I'm wondering if the applicants would all be interested in, if it's going to go back to stack, as Commissioner Longstreet suggested, if the applicants would be interested in hiring an independent arborist to come assess the risk of falling on people or property. The cost of an arborist would be pennies compared to how much it's going to cost to take those giant trees down. And if they both serve, taking it down would ease your worries, and having an arborist telling you it's maybe not a risk would ease your worries. I'm wondering if it would be worth doing.
Can I answer that briefly?
Yes.
In my world, we deal with risk assessment and risk decisions all the time. And we would view this as a low probability, high consequence kind of risk. So it may be very unlikely that it would happen in the next year or the next 10 years. Maybe in that 10-year window, it's more probable. But if it were to happen, it carries some pretty severe consequences with it. And I don't want to be responsible for that. I don't want the financial liability, but I don't want the moral liability either of that tree creating severe damage or potentially injury. So that's our perspective on it. We grant that it's not diseased. We grant the issue that it may be a relatively low probability of occurrence, but it carries high consequences.
Thank you. I think Mr. Downey did point out that when the Street Tree Advisory Committee did visit the site, they made the comment that some smart pruning, as opposed to Edison pruning, could decrease the weight from the top of the trees and maybe make it appear a little bit safer.
Well, I would feel more comfortable postponing this decision for a month, sending it back to STAC, having them look at it in regards to what you could prune with what's left. How that would all work, because we have some expertise there that will help us with that, and Mr. Downey will look at it from that perspective. Because to me, what happened to that tree is pretty severe, and so I will make a motion that we refer this item back to STAC for one more visit, please.
I have one question. Looking at these two photos, the photo that was submitted with the application and then the photo that was included with Mr. Ferguson's letter, it looks like there's two stalks of a tree in the one that was submitted with the application, and it looks like one stalk, I don't know if it's a separate stalk, I don't know if it's just the angle. Looks like one has already been removed. Is that accurate? No.
Chair
just
Clark,
the angle.
Commissioner Martinez-Collins, there have not been any removed. There has been some pruning work done, and the angle of the photograph kind of accentuates that a little bit.
Okay.
Commissioner McGill?
So I'm just building a little bit on Commissioner Longstreet's comments. I know that the application is predicated on safety and risk versus consequence, which I totally understand. But given the amount of pruning that's happened, it seems that the scope should also be expanded to look at what can realistically be achieved by pruning and what the aesthetic damage has already been. And, I don't think it should just be, at this point, risk of tipping over. I think it's all related, actually, but.
Commissioner Longstreet?
There was no second. There was no second to my motion, so I don't know where that stands.
I will second the motion for a second time.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that motion carries.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item is 2302 Anacapa Street, Cedrus Deodara. The applicant indicated that they had had some past plumbing problems, that the tree seems large for the lot, and they're concerned for fire safety. Additionally, they tend to shade the giant bird of paradise trees that are behind it. The committee reviewed it and determined that this tree is quite impressive and a great value to the neighborhood, that with some pruning, they could clear the tree back from the roof a little bit to decrease any fire risk, and that because of that, they recommend that this removal be denied.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Downey?
Quick question about the application. It does mention roots infiltrating plumbing. Did you see any evidence of that?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, the applicants were actually at the meeting, and there was discussion about, we asked them what they had observed as far as the plumbing issues. They said that there was maybe 15 years back, and they had replaced the line and had not had any issues since.
And just a quick one. If there was a contingency, a replacement tree proposed, would that have made a difference in your assessment or the committee's assessment?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, certainly when applicants offer to replace trees, that's looked upon favorably. I can't say whether that would have swayed the committee's decision because the tree is quite fitting with the neighborhood, and they felt it would be a loss.
Commissioner Longstreet?
When I visited the site, I would have to agree, and I don't exactly see the fire danger in that it is a solo tree. It's not a tree that would be part of a fire ladder or any of those things that would keep fire moving down the Riviera or any of that. It is pretty solitary where it stands. And so I would move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee and deny the removal at 2302 Anacapa Street of the Deodar cedar.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nice.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is a street tree designation. The current designation for all of South Hope Street between State Street and the freeway where it runs is Syagrus romanzoffianum, queen palm. At one point, the tree that was designated was jacaranda. At some point, the commission changed away from that, and we don't have records to figure out why that happened. But there's an opportunity with some developments that are going in that are creating larger planters in the right-of-way that would accommodate larger trees than the queen palms currently provide. The other thing that the committee mentioned is if you're familiar with that road, traffic travels pretty fast down that road. Caltrans did a number of studies to determine whether or not plant material had an effect on traffic speed, and their studies showed that when there were mature trees adjacent to highways, traffic was much slower than sections where there wasn't any mature canopy trees. And the committee feels that a few well-placed jacarandas along there will also help slow down traffic on Hope. So their recommendation is to co-designate jacaranda, mimosifolia jacaranda for all of South Hope.
Does anyone have any questions?
Just a quick one. Would there be any issue with regard to visibility in terms of getting in and out of driveways that would be a concern given the speed of traffic?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, the project is specifically involved the Transportation Division of Public Works, who looks at that very carefully. We discussed the number of trees and where they might be placed for this project and took that into account as far as visibility of traffic flow. It's also a thing that we consider when we plant new trees anywhere in the city is how that might impact the visibility of people entering and exiting driveways or intersections. We have general guidelines about how far we go from those, but then we take into consideration, as an example, on Hope Avenue, there's a big curve in this one section where the project is going in. And then, so we wouldn't be able to put as many trees, but there will be opportunities for a few trees.
Thank you. Anyone like to entertain a motion?
Sure. I'm never very good at this. I will make a motion that we change to Jacaranda as a co-designation for South Hope Avenue. Is that good enough?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Downey. That brings us to our director's report.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, one item. We had our annual Rose Garden pruning event last Saturday, and it was appropriately scheduled after it rained, although I will say that the Parks Division staff chose to reschedule it because of the rain, so it was a great call on their part. Beautiful day, in fact, probably the most wonderful weather days we've had in Santa Barbara since the winter began. The volunteers did a tremendous job. If you haven't had a chance to go past the Rose Garden, which is in Mission Historical Park, and prepares those roses for the future. And we get to enjoy them again in the spring, summer, and fall. Thank you.
Thank you to all the volunteers that turned out and helped us keep our parks beautiful. Now we have a Neighborhood Outreach Services Program Review. Welcome.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we have the team from Neighborhood and Outreach Services here. Susan Young, I believe, is going to do the presentation with Ricardo Venegas, and they've got other staff here to answer your questions.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Susan Young with Neighborhood and Outreach Services. There was a published report, and one of the contributors made the statement that ensuring the success of families and children is the only insurance policy for our economic and cultural future. And when going on to talk about how communities are our well-being, he stated, if my community is profiting well, then I'm profiting well. And that really is Neighborhood and Outreach Services. Our goal is to create programs, be it educational, cultural, nutritious, recreational, that would strengthen our families, especially our youth and seniors, in order to try to enhance and strengthen our communities. So the members of Neighborhood and Outreach Services are here today just to give a brief overview of what we do as a Parks and Recreation Commission staff. The staff of our program includes myself as well, and a administrative specialist, Jessica, who's not here today. And then it's also supported by Ricardo Venegas, who's also going to be reporting with me this afternoon. And he's over at the Franklin Neighborhood Center with Roberta Payan, who works to help to coordinate our youth council members, who you saw earlier. Alejandro Valencia, who works in our youth employment program, and she coordinates that. We have a vacant position for Franklin Teen Center. We want to increase the things that are happening with our youth on the east side, and so we're going to hire someone to help with that. We also have Ariana Billick, and Ariana does an excellent job in working with our recreation facility coordinators, and she works closely with Christy Roja, who handles our community gardens and food distribution, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the evening. So there's usually 4 areas that we do our programs with. Our programs are handled through our co-sponsored programs and collaborations, which helps us to be able to do these things. We do nonprofit facility leases. We only lease 2 nonprofit organizations. We also do our neighborhood facility rentals. Most of our story is with our youth and teen programming and also with our neighborhood services. When it comes to our co-sponsored programs and services, as you can see, we work with a number of other agencies and nonprofits. By working with these other agencies, we're able to do some of the program because our staff is very small, and it also enhances the relationships that we have in Parks and Recreation with others in the community. These programs go from a gamut of whether it's senior lunch programs or food distribution. We also work closely with Housing Authority with the during tax time. We work with the Sampson Clinic and the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department. We also work with other different individual programs such as the Santa Barbara Teen Coalition, the South Coast Task Force on Youth Safety. We work closely with the Tobacco Prevention Program with the county, Youth Wellness Coalition, and also the Coalition Against Gun Violence, which are working very closely with our Youth Council and their gun safety program. Also, as I mentioned before, we do nonprofit facility leases. This allows us to bring into our centers those that can bring out programs that we're not directly doing. So at the Westside Neighborhood Center, we have the United Cerebral Palsy, or UCP. We have both UCP of Los Angeles and also UCP Works. Also, there's Independent Living Resource Center, where Jacob is, and so we work closely with him as well. Then at the Franklin Neighborhood Center, we have the County Public Health Department, which has been there for several years. We recently got the Terrace Foundation, which is doing a wonderful job in helping contribute to programs. They're also part of the Pilgrim Terrace program, so you probably have heard of them. And we also recently got the California Rural Legal Assistance that has just joined us, and they're doing some work that Ricardo can talk about more if you need more information. Also, we're responsible for the 1235 Teen Center, which is obviously very close to our heart because it was created in conjunction with the Santa Barbara Youth Council, and so we still have that lease, as well as the lease for the Haley Street Youth Center. One of the main things that everyone knows us by are our neighborhood centers. And so our neighborhood centers, the Westside Neighborhood Center, Franklin Neighborhood Center, Luis Lowry Davis Center, McKenzie, and Ortega, are where we have a lot of community use and rentals. You heard about a lot of the facilities last month with Susan Jane Bardick, and mainly the McKenzie and Ortega. Ariana does an excellent job with the West Side and the Franklin Luis in making sure that our community has an affordable place to have some of their events. Our centers are small, but they also are capacity. It could be up to 175 at the West Side Center, and then the Luis Lowry Davis Center and the Franklin have a little smaller capacity. But at these centers, there's a great venue for individuals and community events, as exhibited by some of the pictures. They're used from a gamut of things, from birthday parties to weddings, but also there are some communities or businesses that oftentimes will rent the facility. So one of our main things is our teen programming, and I'm going to start it off, and then Ricardo will continue. But one of our main things that we do is the Santa Barbara Youth Council. And with the Youth Council, though they are an advisory body to the Mayor and City Council and the Parks and Rec Commission, they actually do a lot of things that are for youth programming. And so the Youth Council started off as the 1991 with the United Youth Empowered. And in 2013, the City Council formally established it as a city advisory board. And their focus is, as mentioned, to make recommendation to this board as well as to the mayor and city council, and to help other young people on dealing with youth issues or have young people to come to them. They work very closely with other youth service agencies and also those youth service agencies' leader committees, because there are a lot of communities, a lot of teen communities that have actual leadership boards as well. And so the Youth Council does a lot of collaboration with those boards, such as Future Leaders or COYA, which is a Coalition Against Youth Advocate. A couple of their projects that they have going on is their Project AMA, and which we're going to talk a little bit more about at another time. And their Youth Gun Safety is one of their newer programs that they're working with the Coalition Against Youth Violence. They're doing some work now with the Youth Mental Wellness. That's where they will do the collaboration for the teen suicide. In order to make them available to do all these things, the Youth Council does yearly training. Their training includes things such as public speaking and project planning. And by their doing this in-house training, they're able to go forth and to train other young people at different things such as their teen leadership conference, which is one of their main things. They also do national training. The city has been very gracious in allowing them to attend the National League of Cities, which gives them an opportunity to sit with adults who are also doing more youth things on a more national level. And then one of the things that they also do is work very closely with the Franklin Youth Center, and I'm now going to turn it over to Ricardo.
Thank you. So Teen Programs has a lot of different programs available for youth in the community to assist them with a variety of things. For our purposes for NOS, we coordinate two very important programs for the community, and that is the Youth Employment and the Santa Barbara Arts Alliance. The Youth Employment Training Program is a program for youth and young adults between the ages of 14 to 21. And the goal is to provide them up to 160 hours of employment within the city of Santa Barbara. So what we do is we get youth from the community that fall in this target area, which is youth at high risk, youth being on probation, youth with a history of family violence and incarceration, youth that have poor academic performance and attendance, as well as youth living in communities exposed to violence and poverty. I would say that 80% of the youth meet all these requirements. 100% of the youth are extremely low income, so that kind of gives you an idea of the youth that we're getting into the Youth Employment Training Program. The other program I mentioned is the Santa Barbara Arts Alliance, and this particular program was founded in 2005, and it's the same target of youth, ages 14 to 21. And the unique thing about this program is that we provide a free art mentoring program to youth. We serve approximately 75 youth per year, and the goal is really to bring them in and give them an opportunity to really engage in something that's relevant to them, and that is art. And that is the carrot that we provide. What it allows us to do then is to engage the youth in different community service projects to beautify the different areas, especially areas that have a lot of graffiti vandalism, blighted conditions, and so forth. In addition to that, we do a lot of repair of the existing murals. So it's basically a mentor program with an art-based focus on it. It is funded primarily through grants and donations from the community. It's a very successful program. We're very happy with the results. And I think some of you have already seen some of the murals that we have throughout the community. This particular one is one that we did about 4 or 5 years ago at Bonnet Park, where we were having an issue there with vandalism and violence. So we hired a core group of 5 youth to be working under the direction of Manolo Unzueta, Danny Mesa, and Miguel Rodriguez. Manolo Unzueta, as many of you know, is a former teacher, counselor at Santa Barbara City College. Danny and Miguel came in through the program as participants. And under their direction, we had 25 youth working on this mural, which is a 80 by 15 feet high mural. So it was a very, very successful project. What that translated into was a savings in the cost of ongoing graffiti vandalism repair that was happening in that location. So we're very, very happy with the success of the project and the overall participation by the neighborhood. This is another one that we did back in 2013 at the East Side Library. And the same thing, we were having issues with tagging at this location. And what we did, and this is a very important thing that we actually do with every mural project, is that we recruited youth from both the East Side and the West Side to basically eliminate some of those barriers and challenges that they have, the rivalries. And we were able to get youth on this project as well as the other mural projects that we have to work together, basically play together, work together, and live together. And that is one of the focuses that we have with this particular one, as well as the youth employment, is that we get youth from both sides of town and eliminate those barriers that they have and improve on their positive socializing skills and life skills. And this is the result. These murals, especially this one, has not been tagged since it's been up there. I know we've had an issue with another one, but we're working on those things. But again, the savings to the community, the beautification aspect of it, and the building of relationships and connections with the community is very important. This one is over at the Westside Community Center in the parking lot, same thing. But this one was actually inspired by children that came to us, and they wanted to see more of the ocean in their backyard, and this is what we have. Again, same idea. We also have the Youth Drop-In Center over at the Franklin Center, where we conduct most of these programs. Both the Youth Employment and the Arts Alliance live at this location. It's a safe place for the community, especially the youth. We have a combination of different things, both recreational activities, cultural activities, mentoring. We have some amenities. It's not a big place for those of you that have seen it, but this place is magical. It does wonders. And I think it's the idea of just having a place in their own backyard for the kids to come in and relax and enjoy. And if they need tutoring or mentoring, then we have staff available for that is bilingual, bicultural. And I should mention that Roberta Payan and Alejandra Valencia, who are here today, are a big part of that success for the Teen Center and the Youth Employment Program. The other area that we also manage is the community gardens. We have the community gardens on the east side, west side, and up in by the La Cumbre area, which is the Pilgrim Terrace. We have a total of 179 garden plots. The Yadonali Garden has 5 large plots available. The Rancheria plots are pretty much all filled up to capacity. The annual cost for these gardens, and that's per plot, is $67 for city residents, $80 for non-city residents. We also do have a one-time $20 deposit, which is basically a small little fee at the end of the gardening experience. Renters or participants get those $20 back. And that's just to ensure that we maintain the garden in good standing condition. The other one is also very beneficial to our community is the food distribution program. So we have 2 types of distributions, and that is the farmers market program, which has fresh vegetables and fruits, and also the food pantry that has primarily dry and canned goods, vegetables, and fruits as well. The difference is that one of them is a USDA product, and that's the food pantry, and the farmers market is strictly vegetables and fruits. We also collaborate with the Brown Bag program. It is primarily done by a host of volunteers that are coming in through the food bank, but we assist them in facilitating the distribution over at the Westside Community Center. And I have to mention that both Ariana Billick and Christy Rojo do a wonderful job managing these programs. They're the ones that coordinate all activities relating to the programs. They're here with us today if you have any questions for them. But if I was to say the impact of this program, it's one of those programs that it goes beyond and above in really helping out the community, especially in times of crises and disaster, as we saw last year. Many families from different economic backgrounds were assisted by this program, and we're very grateful that it does live in the community centers because it's accessible to all in the community. So I thank the food bank, and I thank our volunteers, who some of them are here today, and I thank Hariana and Christy for continuing with the management of the food distribution programs. Some of the requirements for these are basically that they are low income, which pretty much, I would say about 100% of the families that come through the program are low income to extremely low income. It is geared to folks 18 and over. And as far as the Brown Bag program, that's primarily for seniors 60 and over. And this is our food distribution schedule. For the Franklin, we have it every Thursday at 1 p.m. The food pantry, the third Tuesday of each month at 1:30. At Parque de los Niños, we have the food pantry the first Tuesday of each month at 1:30. And the farmers market at 1 p.m. the second Tuesday. Westside Center is every Monday at 1 p.m. On average, I think we're getting about, I would say, 70 to 80 families that come in at each of those locations. So multiply that by 3 to 5 members per family, and you can see the impact of that program. So that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, we're available, as well as some of the other staff here from the different programs.
I would like to point out the staff. They just raised their hand. That's Roberta. She does our youth council program. Alejandra does our youth employment program. And there's Christy that does our food distribution and community gardens. And Ariana takes care of our neighborhood rentals. And I did want to recognize Taya Blumenthal, who did come to give the report for youth council, but got stuck on a bus. And yes, and that's what the hardworking staff at Neighborhood Outreach Services does. And we'll answer any questions if you like.
Thank you for using alternative transportation. We're sorry you got stuck. I did have one question for your programs for the at-risk youth. How do you identify the at-risk youth? Is it through school counselors or law enforcement?
It's a combination of different things, but the primary outreach and recruitment that we do is through probation officers, La Cuesta High School, Quetzal, Las Alturas, and then the other partners in the community like the Bridges program, the Department of Rehab, and so forth, as well as some outreach to reentry students or students that are not currently in school. And that's usually done by going out to the different hotspots in the community, neighborhoods, and basically hitting the pavement and reaching out to them.
For your work in identifying people who need your services. Commissioner McGill?
Yes, it's just a question about the Youth Employment and Arts Alliance. It's an extraordinary program, but what I wonder is, do you have a waiting list? I mean, do you have the resources and ability to take everyone who's interested in and wants to do it, or are you limited in any way?
There's a little bit of a limitation, but we don't turn anybody away. What we do is we assign crews to the different projects. For instance, we have a graffiti and abatement crew that does that every third Thursday of the month. We do Adopt a Block program activities, and that's completely volunteer. The crew that does the graffiti abatement, we give them specific targets, either on Milpa Street or locations on the east side, and it's usually a group of 6 to 10. And they go to each location, basically taking care of graffiti issues under the supervision of one of our mentors. Youth that just want to come in and have the experience of drawing, we have the drop-in center that's available, and they can come in and basically participate in arts and crafts or individual art projects under the direction of one of our adult mentor artists. And everything is provided to them free of charge. So I don't think we've ever had an issue where we weren't able to serve anybody. So we find a way to help everyone.
If I might add to that, Commissioner McGill, what we do also, because we work with the Santa Barbara Teen Coalition, we kind of share names of teens. So if it's something that we can't do, we refer it out maybe to some other programs that may be looking for teens. So we just find a way to make sure those teens stay involved and active in some type of programming.
Commissioner Perry?
I've been involved with Boys and Girls Club for a couple of decades. I've seen what they've done. I'm familiar with Youth Interactive. I'm very familiar with PAL. You're a new operation or new organization to me, but I'm curious, is there any collaboration between all the teen-focused organizations to cross-pollinate, share resources, share kids?
Absolutely. We've actually done several murals for the Boys Club, at least the West Side Boys Club. They have 4 murals in the back patio that we did with them. We also, in terms of cross-pollinating, what we do is we share the kids. So Susan mentioned earlier that we actually go out of our way to introduce our kids to the other organizations. One of the things that's a little bit challenging is, getting, especially the youth that we work with, is getting them to basically participate in another organization that they're not very familiar with. So we facilitate that. We do work with primarily the schools right now in terms of art projects, but again, other agencies also refer to us and so forth. Los Piretos Boys Camp is another one that we also work with. Again, sometimes if we can assist, we'll bring one of our contacts through the coalitions that we have to assist where we can't participate for whatever reasons.
And Commissioner Perry, just to add to that, we're both I'm on the leadership committee for the Santa Barbara Teen Coalition, which recently just changed their name to the Santa Barbara County Teen Network because we spread out through the county. Ricardo also sits on the service providers, and so both of those groups have 40 to 50 different agencies that do just youth programming, and we meet quarterly just to exchange information. So we work both PAL's part of it and as well as both of the Boys and Girls Club.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
What did you say the name change was to?
It changed to Santa Barbara County Teen Network because we're more of a network than a coalition. We're not out for any particular one cause, so they just recently changed it to a network because we do networking with other different youth service agencies.
Thank you for that.
I would just like to say thank you because I do think you serve a very specialized group of young people who have very special needs. It's almost like you're a gateway program back into the community in many cases. Kids that I have seen you work with kids that are just teetering on the edge. And so thank you for that. And I do think the employment part of it is really important. I've watched when you've had your workshops on how to fill out an application, how to get there on time, and you watch them, you help them, you teach them. So with a very small staff and a lot of dedication, I think that's what it's about, is your dedication. So thank you so much. And the mural over on the East Side Library, every time I look at it, there's something new that jumps out at you. It's such an intricate mural, beautiful work, and I know that again was a dedication. Having Mr. Unsueta available to nurture that program has been so important. So thank you to everybody that keeps these things going.
Thank you.
Chair Clark and commissioners, we have a recognition that is closely aligned with the presentation you just received. But I'd also like to recognize the fact that Ricardo Venegas for a number of years has raised funds from outside of the city to fund the Youth Arts Alliance and other programs, as has Susan and the Youth Council. It's not that the general fund entirely supports this, supports the staff associated with it, but in order to pay youth, it's not necessarily something that the city can always do, and has successfully found ways to supplement those programs with grant funding, and that's commendable as well.
On behalf of the Commission, thank you for your dedication and service to our youth and our community. Thank you. We would like to, at this time, thank and recognize our volunteers for the food distribution program. I'm going to come up with some certificates. Oh.
Yes, Commissioner, Madam Chair and members of the Commission, and thank you. Yes, at this time we talked a little bit about the food distribution program, which in our staff is run by Christy Rojo, who does an excellent job. Her personality matches what she does at that work, and we really appreciate what she does. But she someone's copying, by all means, but she indicates very highly that she couldn't do this without the volunteers, and so this afternoon we really are very happy that you're able to recognize some of the volunteers, many of which have given way over 10 years to the program, and so we look forward to you recognizing them. They come and without anything but their personality, they serve people, they stand there, they get in line after people oftentimes, and so really they do a lot of sweat and grunt work, and we really think they should be recognized, and we appreciate you doing that this time.
I think what these volunteers do, it's not glamorous and it's not high profile, and yet they come back day after day, week after week. It's true service and true dedication. So that being said, there's a lot of people who do a lot of good in this community. I'm going to read their. Is that on? Okay. The first person I would like to
These are the ones that are here.
Oh,
That'll
okay.
make life easy.
Oh, okay. I can still read them all, right? So there's Janice Aramaki. She's not here. Wanda Butcher. Thank you, Wanda. Sam Carr. Pablo Flores. Thank you so much, Mr. Flores, for your time. Narciso Gonzalez. Okay. Thanks. Angel Hernandez. Even though there are so many that couldn't make it, I still want to make sure that they're recognized. So Gary Krasnoft. Sonia Lane, and this one is in memoriam. So thank you to her family. Richard LaPaglia. Sandra Lee. Laura Lynch. Susanna Madreno. Thank you. Thank you very much. Kat Marquez. Thank you. Glenda Marroquin. Thank you so much. All you do. Jacob Miller. Merced Mora. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Carl Negus. Armando Ortiz. Lorenza Perez. Julie Reed. Soraya Sanchez. Did I say it right? Soraya. Tim Schroeder. Mark Soler. Polly Silvassi. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Elvira Tafoya. Oh, thank you so much. Deborah Tippett. Looks like everyone has been here. Dr. Bernard Valeska. And Christina Van Stoken. Yeah, thank you to all the volunteers that help nurture our community.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I have a couple of additional comments. The fact that we have community centers in Santa Barbara that are owned and operated by the city, that are staffed by Parks and Recreation, that are benefited by the community in so many ways is really important. We often think about parks and outdoor spaces. We think about sports fields, but community centers are also part of what we do and how we contribute to the social well-being of Santa Barbara. And the volunteers that help make so many of these programs happen and the collaborations that we have are really what give community strength to Santa Barbara and that we really appreciate and make our jobs more meaningful as well. I'd like to point out, you read all of those names. Not everybody could be here. We do have a recognition lunch as well for volunteers that staff put on and coordinate, and that's a great way that we can give back to them as well. And just lastly, I would like to recognize that Councilmember Kristen Sneddon has been with us for this entire meeting. She is your new liaison from the City Council, and want to make sure that we recognize that she took the time to come out to today's commission meeting.
All right. I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. So this one I'm just a little bit confused about. We have on our agenda the Street Tree Advisory Committee appointments. I know that the appointments were discussed and decided upon at the last commission meeting, which I was unable to attend.
So, Chair Clark and Commissioners, yes, at the last meeting, you had interviews and made appointments to the Golf Advisory Committee and also the Street Tree Advisory Committee. The Street Tree Advisory Committee had 3 applicants, and there was much discussion on the dais regarding who to appoint to the Advisory Committee. At that time, Maury Tremin chose to step away from her request to continue to serve. And in the back and forth between the commission and the applicants, the commission actually didn't formally make a motion and take a vote to appoint the 2 members to the commission. We'd like you to do that in order to make sure that we're following procedure.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
I know, can you refresh my memory, Ms. Zachary? The second applicant is Bob
We
Cunningham.
have it on your agenda.
Okay.
It's, I'm sorry, he's a new applicant, so I haven't
He is.
memorized his name yet. Did the staff report?
Anthony DeMola. Then I would move we appoint Anthony DeMola and Bob Cunningham to the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
Second.
Is there any discussion? And those are the only 2 applicants at this time. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so moved. And with that being said, I'll adjourn today's meeting.